everything we need to know to make that hat, plus quite a few other things that you're not going to need for the hat. So we're going to learn quite a bit today, but at the end of class, after we review everything, you will have the skills you need to make a hat. And we're going to review the pattern at the very end. So a lot of what we do in class is going to be even extra. It's going to be even a little bit more than what you'll need for the hat. And so for today, for demonstrating in class, I'm going to be demonstrating with this yarn called Hometown Bonus Bundle, and it's by Lion Brand. But when we make the hat, we're going to be using a worsted weight yarn, and it's a different yarn. But I like this one for demonstrating because it's a thicker, bigger, chunkier yarn, so it's easier for the students to see what I'm doing. So that's why I'm using two different types of yarn. They're both available on lionbrand.com or on michaels.com. So if you want to get some yarn and practice with, then that would be a great opportunity, a great place to go. So if we want to go ahead and switch the view to the view of my hands, we'll go ahead and get started. And so today, I am using this hook by Lion Brand. It's an N13, also a 9mm. So there's several different ways of describing how big the hook is. I usually say an N. Everyone else in the world uses the metric system, but it's too complicated for me. So, there's that. And then whatever yarn you decide to use, for practicing or for whatever you're doing, you want to look and see what size hook the yarn is recommending. And this yarn is recommending an N13, which is what I'm using today. If you don't have the right size hook, it's not the end of the world. You can usually go up one or down one hook size and not run into many problems. So you can go ahead and give it a try. So with crochet, you do have to do things, a certain way. You have to be careful, but it's not like an exact science that if you don't do everything exactly right, then everything's going to go wrong. You can still usually make things work. So last week we learned single crochet and how to chain, and so this week we're going to learn double, half double, and triple crochets. So if you need to review some of the basics, you can go back and rewatch what we did last week. And but we've got a lot to cover this week. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 8 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so I've chained 8 stitches. And the first stitch I'm going to teach you today is called half double crochet. And so when we're working with a half double crochet, we need to, instead of working with 8 chains, I'm actually going to be working with 10 chains. I chained 10 and I'm going to be working with, I'm sorry, I chained 8. I'm going to be working with 8 stitches, but we're going to have to use 2 extra chains and I'll explain why. So for half double crochet, we need 2 extra chains. And what happens with those 2 extra chains is they end up being turned up on their side. And so instead of being part of the foundation chain or as part of the width of your project, those 2 other chains become the side of it. So they make up the height and start to create the very beginning of the next row or create that side. And that'll make sense as we're practicing. So for a half double crochet, you always want to skip those first 2 chains that we made. And so you'll enter in the 3rd chain from the hook. Now, the way you look at that is the loop that's on your hook, this loop right here on my hook, does not count. So we don't count that one. That one never counts. And this is 1 chain. This is 2 chains. And so the 3rd chain from the hook is where we're going to go in. So the first step for a half double is we yarn over. So you take your yarn over your hook. You enter your chain, the 3rd chain from the hook, and then you bring up a loop. And so at this point, I have 3 loops on my hook. You yarn over, and then you pull that through all 3 loops, and that is, I have finished my half double crochet. I have 1 loop on my hook. Now I'm going to demonstrate this several times, so if you have questions, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to do a couple more. So always start with a yarn over. So you yarn over, enter the chain, the next chain. We're not skipping any of that now. Yarn over, bring up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over and pull it through all 3. Yarn over, enter the chain, yarn over, bring up a loop, yarn over. And when you're pulling that yarn over through all of those loops, of course it helps if you kind of turn it down so it slides through it nicely. And then I've worked 3 half doubles. Any questions? What questions do you have that I can help you with right now? What type of questions do we have? Any questions?
We'll wait for anybody to type in the chat. I do see several people practicing along in their videos. That's always fun.
Yeah, and that's usually that's when you'll have your questions too. It'll make perfect sense when you watch somebody else do it, but then when you do it, that's of course when. So as you're practicing, watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to finish this row. Finishing the row is very easy. So I'm just going to make a half double in my last chain. So nothing special here. Pull it through all 3. I'm going to lay it down just for 1 second so you can see. Finished my row. And now what I need to do to create the height for my next row, I'm going to chain 2. So 1 and 2. I'm going to lay it down here so you can see it. Now this chain 2 that I added is going vertical. So it's creating the height for the side of the next row. It does not add length to my work. So it's not adding additional work length that direction. It's basically the first step for your next row. It adds that height and gets you started on the next row. And so then you turn your work and then you start just like we did before. Only this time, because we're on the second row, we're not going to skip a stitch. Basically, we're still skipping, those 2 chains because we chained up and that creates the side. But we're going to work right now that we have actual stitches to look at. We're going to work right into that first stitch, but we are still kind of skipping those 2 chains, but they're not really stitches, so we don't really look at them that way. So yarn over, bring it through all 3. And if you look at the top of this, look at it from the top, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, they move all along. So these, they almost look like V shapes, or if you're a knitter, they almost look like a knit stitch. That's what we're looking for each stitch. And what we're doing is we're going right here, kind of put your finger to kind of make that opening. And we're entering that opening. We're going under both strands of yarn and then pulling it under. But I forgot to do my yarn over first. So we'll go yarn over, enter our work, bring up a loop, yarn over, pull it through all 3. Yarn over, enter the stitch, enter our work, yarn over, bring up a loop, yarn over, and then pull it through all 3. I'm going to stop right here, just for a second and see if anyone has questions. How are we doing?
We've got a couple questions about the beginning chain. And some people have a little fewer stitches and some people have a little more, which is something that comes with practice. But specifically on the last stitch in the chain.
Okay. So people that have fewer stitches and people that have more, does that mean they started out with fewer or they ended up losing stitches as they went?
We had at least one person lose a stitch and one person possibly gain a stitch. So we went in both directions.
All right, that happens. That's a real thing. Okay, so I chained 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let me see. Maybe I want to make sure I'm exactly right, because if we're going to be counting, we want to make sure we're counting correctly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Remember, the loop on your needle does not count. I'm going to do half double, so that means I need to add 2 to create my side edge. And so I'm going to skip the first 2. So 1 and 2 I'm skipping. So I'm going to enter the third chain from my hook. And it is a good idea to count after the end of each row. So when you make your chain, you want to count. And when you finish each row, you want to count to make sure that you're not, that you started out with exactly what you intend to. Because as you saw, I counted wrong. So I went back and started again just to double check and make sure it was right. And that can happen to anyone. The most experienced crocheter can get off count. It's not a hard thing to do. Okay, so here is a chain, and then here is a chain, and this is my slip knot. So you don't really want to chain into the slip knot. So
Okay, I think that might have been what confusing some people because you've got
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I have 8.
So you don't go into the knot itself, but you go into the loop that was made by the slip stitch when it was the first one on the hook.
Yes, and then you just double check and count and make sure you have 8 at this point. And that's why it's also a nice idea, like not to chain when you're practicing, not to chain like 50, because you want to make sure you're able to maintain your counts. You want to work with a small number so that you can make sure you're, maintaining that. And then I'm going to chain 2 to go up. And then go ahead and count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you're seeing where you're going to go in. We're going to go right in here. Each one of these counts as a stitch if you're looking at them from the side or if you're looking at them from the top. They go that way. And then we are going to start with the yarn over. Okay, so how's everyone doing? Working along? Are we able to do it? Or do we want to start over at the beginning? Or how do we want to proceed? How do we feel about these?
Ellen wants you to count the stitches after you finish this row. We can see where they're all going into.
If I have 8, you never know. It's always a gamble. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so you want to, each one of these kind of holes right here, depending on how you want to look at it, you can look at these holes or these openings. That counts. You can look kind of at these posts here. That can count as a stitch. Or if you look at them from above, you can go right in through here.
Speaking of above there, Mary wants to know, the first stitches go in one loop, the second row goes through the V.
What is that question? I don't understand.
Like when you work into the chain, typically most people just go through one leg of the V, but for every other row, you'll go under both legs of that V.
Yeah, there's several ways you can actually work into the chain. Can get really complicated, so I hate to waste time on that. There are 3 different ways you can work into the chain, but for most projects, it's okay just to work through like the first little opening in the chain. Like the easiest way to get through it is going to be fine. So you can go through both of those V's when you're going through the chain, and that's perfectly fine. It is a little harder to kind of keep track of that, but if that is easier for you, then you're welcome to do it. But I don't really want to get into discussing that today and taking up a lot of time. Does that answer that?
One more, yeah. One more question from Luz wanted to know, do the 2 chains that go up the side count as a stitch?
No. Well, there's never a clear answer, is there? For what we're doing today, the answer is no. And frequently when you read a pattern, it will tell you, it'll say chain 2, turn. The chain 2 does not count as a stitch, or it may tell you the chain 2 does count as a stitch. And that's another thing that is a slightly more advanced technique. We are going to touch on that in Crochet 3. We're going to talk about, there's 2 options, there's 2 ways of doing it, but I don't want to get into that today. But just knowing that there are 2 ways of doing it. But for today, what we're going to do is that does not count as a stitch. It just counts as the side structure. And then we're going to count each one of these stitches here as the stitch. And that will help us maintain the exact number of stitches easier. And then as we get comfortable with that, we can look at other ways of doing it, a little more advanced ways after we practice. But for today, no, that does not count as a stitch. Okay, are we ready to move on to double, or do we want to see half double again, or what are we doing? Where are we?
I think we could probably stand to see another row of half double.
So I did my chain 2, turn your work. Okay, so yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, wrap it, pull through all 3. Yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, pull that through all 3. Yarn over, so once you learn this and you get into the rhythm of it, it's actually a lot of fun to do, and it's really quite easy. I mean, that's easy for me to say because I've probably done it a million times or more, but once you get into it, it actually gets easier and easier with more practice. And this is my favorite crochet stitch. I love a half double. Finished my row, and then chain 2. Whoops, I chained 3. What does that mean? Maybe we're going to do double. What do we think? I'm going to see a double.
We have one more question. Someone's having trouble when they yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. They're losing loops and splitting the yarn. Do you have any tips for that?
Well, I mean, that is a thing, and that does probably get easier with practice, but let's look and see how I'm doing it. Maybe that'll help. So yarn over, enter the stitch, yarn over, bring up a loop. And so once you get right here, one thing you can see is I'm kind of keeping a lot of, it's not tight. So you can see I'm letting there be some slack, and there's room for it to move on my hook. If you're on each one of these steps, if you're pulling it really tight, then it's going to be hard to pull it through. So as you're working with it, try not to pull it tight and let there be a little slack in it. And that's going to help if there's a little slack. And then for your final yarn over, so you don't want to try to pull it like this. You want to turn your hook so it's facing down. And as your hook's facing down, you want to kind of pull your hook up and pull down on your work. And that kind of creates a little opening, a little window, and then that might help you pull it through a little easier. Plug my phone in. Hold on 1 second. All right. Any other questions? Does that help? Does that answer that question? You think that'll help?
I think that'll help. And it sounds like we're all ready for some double crochet.
Okay, let's rip this out. And once you master half double, double's like the next logical step, and it shouldn't be such a challenge. It should be all right. So I'm going to finish this row with just the half double. To finish with half double. All right, so with half double, we chained 2. And for double, we're going to chain 3 because it's a taller stitch. So we do need to add a little more height. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3. And that gives us that height. So at the very, very beginning, if you were starting a project and you were going to be working with 20 stitches for your, maybe you're making a scarf and it's going to be 20 stitches wide, the pattern would instruct you at that point, chain 23, and it would say, starting with the fourth chain from the hook, work half doubles in the 20 chains across. The pattern will have, the designer will have already thought that out for you and sorted out those numbers. If you're going to make your own scarf, now that you know how to half double or double, you can just make a scarf on your own without a pattern. And if you want to have 20 stitches, just know you'll have to add those extra 3 at the beginning. So I'm going to start my double. I chain 3 for my side height, and that's going to give me this height for the side. It starts out almost exactly the same. Yarn over, enter your stitch, bring up a loop. So it seems pretty much the same already. We're going to yarn over. We bring it through 2. Yarn over, bring it through 2. So that's the difference, and I'll show you again. So yarn over to start with, 1 yarn over, enter to the work. So at this point, I have 3 loops on my hook. So I yarn over, pull it through 2. So now I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull it through 2. Start with the yarn over, enter the chain, enter your work, go through the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. I have 3. Now, if we were doing a half double at this point, we would yarn over and pull it through all. But we're doing a double, so we yarn over, pull it through 2, yarn over, pull it through 2. And you can see it's a taller stitch, so it does look quite a bit taller. So if you're making a project, this would, say you were making a scarf and you were using double crochet, you would finish it quite a bit faster because the stitches are taller. But you also do use a little bit more yarn in crochet. So there's that. So if you're a knitter and you're learning to crochet, just know that crochet does take a little more yarn, but projects do work up quite a bit faster. Okay, so I'm at the end, my last stitch. Pull it through 2, pull it through 2. Now I'm going to chain 3 to create my height for the side. Turn my work, and I'm just going to lay it out so you can see it. Here's my chain 3 that's going to create my side. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm maintaining my stitch count. All right, I'll do a few more double crochets, but as you're all getting caught up, were there any questions you have that I can address? Was something not clear? Do you want me to show something in a different way? Everything seems pretty good.
We have a couple people saying that the last stitch there on the end, it's hard to find or it doesn't really look like a stitch.
Oh, yes. Let me show you a trick for that. Let me show you. So stitch markers are a marvelous and wonderful thing. So I've got a couple different kinds. I've got these. I prefer these because they're kind of like a little safety pin and you can clip them on and they stay secure. So you can do this a couple ways. So I'm going to stick, just start over here. Oops. So I'm going to finish my last one on this row and went back. So I finished my last double crochet there. And so while I'm right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you can put a stitch marker there, and it does kind of help a little. So I'm going to put a stitch marker there, but that's the last one, but it's going to end up being the first one as soon as we turn our work, but it's still nice to have it. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. And then sometimes it's nice, you know, you can go ahead and put a stitch marker on that chain 3. So now you know exactly kind of where everything is. And I'm going to turn my work, do my yarn over. Now this is the one we just finished. So this one isn't as helpful because usually this stitch is pretty easy to find. But I'm going to go right in there. I'm going to do my, so I just did my double crochet. And now I'm going to put, while that I'm right here, I'm going to put that stitch marker on that double crochet I just finished. And when I come back across, it'll be easy to find. So I'm splitting my yarn. Don't split your yarn. So let me work a little quickly and I'll try to get back to that so I can show you how that's helpful. Any questions in the meantime till I get back over there?
We do have a question on how you're holding the yarn in your left hand.
This is how my mother holds hers, so of course that's how I hold mine. I just very lightly hold it between my ring finger and my middle finger. And then I use I kind of pull it up like this to grab it. And I create the tension because it's dragging between those two fingers. And that seems to be the easiest way for me to hold it. And I know other people do hold the yarn in different ways. There's lots of different ways. So try some different ways in your hand. I know sometimes people will do something like this and kind of drag it between their fingers. I always feel like I'm going to cut the circulation off on my fingers by doing that. So there's many, many ways of holding it. So let me get back over here to where my stitch marker was, and you can see how that helps.
While you're working on this row, we do have a question for tips on holding the yarn, or sorry, tips on tension. Someone tends to crochet too tightly.
I was doing half double. Nobody caught me out on that, right? I always revert to, if I'm not paying attention, I always end up doing half doubles because it's my favorite stitch. So
Someone also spotted that you forgot to put your stitch marker on this end of the row.
well, I was just trying to hurry and get back to the other end because we do have limited time. I don't use stitch markers as much as I used to because I'm getting a little bit more comfortable. But as a beginner, I think stitch markers are such a great tool. So I kind of got a lot here, so it can be a little confusing. So this was the one from the previous row, so we don't really need that anymore. So that one's really not as necessary. So I used this orange one on my chain, and so the chain is not a stitch. So that's kind of helping us determine that we don't really need to worry about this like little edge piece. But I put this blue one on where my stitch was. So that's where my stitch is. So I'm going to take that out to get it out of my way and do my yarn over, kind of put my finger in there and hold it. And then that will help me to find that stitch each time. And then of course it is important to put a stitch marker on each end so that you do keep track of it. So, but if you forget, before you start your next row, so I did my chain, do my chain 3, and I can go ahead and count them right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this one is my 8th one. So I can kind of stretch it, open it up. And since I forgot to put it while I was over there, I can go ahead and put it in there now. So before I start, I can lay everything out and see how everything looks. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I can go ahead and put my stitch marker there. So once I get over there, they'll start to look a little different because you're working the stitches in front of it. You will be able to see exactly where it is. So if you do forget to put your stitch marker in, as you're counting your stitches, double checking your count, you can add it at this point. All right, so any questions about anything we've covered so far at all? Doing okay?
We've had a couple people notice that the chain 3 sort of sticks out to the side or is adding some extra width to their project.
Yep, that happens. That's kind of a thing. And this, I'm going to tell you this is a little unconventional and the crochet police will not like it. Quite frequently, I do a chain 2 instead of a chain 3 because sometimes that chain 3 does give it a little extra oomph. And sometimes a chain 2 will tighten that up a bit. So if you're finding that it is giving you a lot of, maybe yours are just a little looser, and maybe you can try do a chain 2 and see how that works for you. But don't tell anyone I said it, because people get very upset when you start changing the rules. When I do a half double, instead of chaining 2, I usually only chain 1. Probably shouldn't admit that, but when I teach, I do try to teach the best practice and what's like supposed to be the rules. But then when you live your life, right, you have to live the life that you're born to live, right? You just kind of move on and do what's right for you. Are we ready to do number crochet 3 or triple crochet, or what are we have questions, or where are we?
Think we're ready for a triple crochet here. And then someone also reminded me that we're going to show how to add in a new ball of yarn or a new color, correct?
Absolutely. Okay, so let me just kind of go back. So I'm going to finish my row of double. And for triple, as maybe you've guessed, because we're kind of going with a pattern, you chain 4. It's crazy, right? Look at that chain 4. That's going to add a lot of height. So the triple crochet does, it works up very fast. So if you realize that you were supposed to make a present for somebody and their birthday's tomorrow and you forgot to start it and you want to make a triple crochet scarf, that's probably your best choice because you can finish it really quick. So with the triple crochet, you yarn over twice instead of just yarning over once. So you yarn over twice, and then you enter your work. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 loops. So you yarn over, bring it through 2. I have 3. Yarn over, bring it through 2. I have 2. Yarn over, bring it through 2. You see how big that stitch is? That's a super duper stitch, right? So yarn over twice, enter your work, bring up a loop, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. That's triple crochet. You can see they make a lot of sense when you start with single, half double, double, and then triple. It's all a progression. So that's why I like to teach them in this order, because they really just build right off of each other. And it's quite logical how they progress. Any questions about it though? Any questions on how?
Cheryl has noticed that her triples are loose and have gaps.
Yes, that's the thing about a triple. So you can see here, and that's because they're very long, tall columns, and they're not connected. They're connected at the bottom and the top, but they're not connected on the sides. And that's the same way they all are. So down here with the half doubles, they're only connected on the top and the bottom, but because they're such a short column, you don't get those, you get these holes here, these little holes. And then the double is the same, but because also they're not as, see, that's it, that's how big it is. So you get holes, but not as big. But because this one is so tall, you get these great big holes. And you can work that to your advantage if you're making lace or if you're making something that has a certain texture or shape. Frequently, like in a lace pattern, that can be used to make like flower petals or different things like that. But if you're making a sweater, then it's probably going to end up being a sweater that you should wear like a tank or a chemise or something under it. Or, I mean, I don't know your life, but it is going to be quite sheer. So just knowing your stitches and knowing how they're going to react when you finish them is is part of crocheting. So again, if you're following a pattern, the designer will have thought about this for you, and you will probably have seen a picture of the finished product. So but that is the thing with triple. It does leave quite large gaps.
And while you're finishing this row, Ellen had a question. you don't enter the space between the double crochets, but the little hole above them, right?
Yeah, let's look at it. Okay. So here's the space between the double crochets. And here is the little space above them. And so what you want to look for is you want to look for that, how is it showing up? You want to look for that kind of V shape, or for those two strands of yarn that are resting right along the top edge of your work. That's what you want to look for, and that's where we're going in. Again, with every time somebody asks a question, like, that's not always the answer. There are times when you do go other places, but that's for another class and a more advanced level. So for standard practice and for what we're doing today, you would go right through here. But in crochet, if you're doing something wrong, you're probably not doing something wrong. You're probably doing a more advanced technique that you just aren't quite ready for yet. Because there's so many things in crochet that you can do. It's really quite amazing and lots of fun. So I'm almost finishing my row. So you can see here's the stitch marker I placed earlier. So I know that's my last stitch. Makes it easy to find. Oops, did I do it? Didn't do it right. Right. Yarn over twice.
Darren, can you pull your swatch down a little bit?
Right. Okay, so I finished my row. So I'm going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can see that's how tall my single or my triple crochets are. So they're quite tall, and they do make, you know, these quite large openings. You could do something clever though. What if you took a nice wide ribbon and wove, you know, a row of ribbon through there or something? That might be pretty. You can do things. Okay. So I didn't place a stitch marker again. I wasn't paying attention, so can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, but let me show you what almost looks like it could be a mistake. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it almost looks like that's a stitch there. Like, is that 9? Like, are there 9 or what? But no, that's my chain. So that's, you know, that's something to be cautious of. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so if we just kind of stretch it into shape, we can see that in fact is the chain, and that this right here is our 8th stitch, because I was working with 8. But that's an opportunity to make a mistake and to add a stitch. I mean, you could certainly go right in here and add a stitch if you wanted to. If for some reason you were making your piece bigger, you wanted to start adding stitches, you know, but that's not what we're doing. So, but that's why it's nice to kind of count everything before you start. If something looks funny on that edge, you can figure it out before you get there. Because if I can compare the way that looks to the way all of these look, it makes more sense. But if I've worked stitches in all of these and I get here and all I have to look at is this, it can look quite confusing at times. So yeah, so it's nice to count your stitches before you get started. You can kind of see my triple crochets, my doubles, and my half doubles. You can see the pieces even getting more narrow as you get down to the half double. The stitches are taller, but because they have more space between them, they kind of get a little wider as well. So that's just a little like knowledge about how the stitches act and how they're shaped. All right. Any questions about anything we've done? Do you want to see triple again? Do you want to see, what do we want to see?
We do have a question. Well, Debbie pointed out, she wondered if triple crochet is the same as a treble stitch.
I think it's the same, isn't it? Is it the same word for the same thing, Claire?
Yep, same thing, just different names.
Yeah, I think it's the same.
Yeah. And then we've only got about 15 minutes left, so I'll make sure we cover adding a new yarn or a different color.
I'm going to rip these triples out. And then quickly, the hat pattern is really easy. So let's do this and then we'll get to the hat pattern. Because I do want you to be able to have a chance to make the hat. All right, so I'm going to add this pink in. So I'm doing doubles right here. Okay, so here's the trick right here. So let me go back. So yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, and to finish a double, you would yarn over and bring it through 2, and now my double's finished. But when you're adding a new color, you don't want to do that. So you want to start yarn over, bring through 2, and then you want to wait. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn because well, no, I'm not going to cut it because I want to show you another trick you can do. All right. And so now I'm going to add my pink, and I yarn over, bring through 2. And that way, and I'll show you this again, and I'm going to do my chain 2 for my height. That way I get a nice clean stripe. So let me do it wrong. Sometimes if you do something wrong, it helps to show the right way. So yarn over. So yarn over, bring through 2, yarn over, bring through 2. I finished my double. So now I'm going to chain 2. So 1, 2. But I'm not getting a clean stripe because this gray bit is moving into that next row. I don't know, better without that light. Can you so this one is gray and this one is pink. I don't know how clear that is with this light, but if you...
Yeah, sorry, Darren, there's not a good color difference there.
Color difference. Do I have something else I can... Here. Okay, I'm going to do it, but with the yarn's not as thick, but it'll be a good difference. Okay. So bring it through 2, bring it through 2, and then for my next row up, I'm going to chain 2. Okay, now here you can see this brown, but this gray is moving up into where that brown stripe is going to be. So it's not a good clean mix. So what you want to do is bring it through 2, and then we're not going to finish that last little step. We're going to switch to our new color for the last step of that stitch. Bring it through 2, and now I'm going to chain 2 for my next height, and you can see that gives me a good clean stripe. And now what I'm going to do is quickly, and I'm not going to go all the way across because I'm trying to save time. So I'm going to do double crochets. Pretend, work with me here, pretend I finished this whole row. So I just finished the whole row. I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to go back. because I want to show you a nice trick that we're going to use for the hat as well. Okay, so I finished that. Now I want to switch back to gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of cutting the gray and then reattaching it up here, because then I'm going to have a lot of ends to weave in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry the gray up the side. So let me go back. So I'm going to yarn over, bring through 2. I'm going to switch to my gray to finish that stitch. Yarn over and bring through 2, and that will give me a nice clean stripe for my next row. I'm doing half doubles, or I'm sorry, I'm doing doubles, so I'm going to chain 2 or 3. Technically, we're supposed to do 3. Turn your work. Okay. So is any, I know I'm kind of doing this fast because I wanted to make sure we covered it. Is this, any of this making sense?
And this would be the same process for adding more yarn of the same color, correct?
Yeah, adding more yarn of the same color, but except for you don't have to worry about having a clean color switch because of course it's the same color. So you can kind of add it almost any point during that stitch. Okay, so I'm going back across. I'm going to switch to half double because it's faster.
And if you're carrying the yarn up the side like you're showing now, you've got a big loop of the gray there. What should we do with that?
Well, I'm going to show you for the hat. Now, if you're making a scarf, you're right, you might not want that. If the stripes are this wide, you might want to go ahead and cut it and weave it in because you are going to end up with. But if you're using a thinner yarn, you'd be surprised it's really not going to show so much. Or if you do a crocheted edging, you can kind of conceal that in the crocheted edging if you know you're going to put an edging on it. But for the hat that we're going to make, I'm going to show you how we're going to hide that and it'll be fine. Okay, so bring it through 2. I'm going to switch colors. This will give me a nice clean stripe. You do want to make sure you're not pulling that tight. You want to make sure you're giving yourself plenty of room there. And then turn your work and keep going. And so, yeah, you want to make sure, you do want to make sure you're carrying these all up the same side. I left maybe a little extra slack here. You might not need quite that much, but you don't want to make it too tight. All right, any questions about anything we've covered so far along here? I know it seems like a lot of information. It really is, actually.
We do have a question for you to review how to do the double crochet again.
Okay, and then I do want to review the pattern. You got about 6 minutes. Just finish off this row.
While you're finishing that row, I'll just remind everybody that we are recording this class. So you can go back tomorrow at michaels.com/classes or on the Michaels YouTube channel, and you can pause and rewind as much as you need to there.
All right, so when you're doing, so you start off with chain 3 on the side is the official way. Yarn over once, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, bring it through 2, bring it through 2. Yarn over once to start, enter your fabric, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. And that is the double crochet. So I do want to look at the pattern for this hat. We've covered everything we need to make the hat. And then I quickly want to show a little bit of a seaming thing, a seaming note. So for this, it is a free pattern from Lion Brand. It is the Crochet Level 2 striped hat. It's a free pattern. You can print it from home. It's using 2 balls of yarn. This Heartland, I'm sorry, it's called Homeland Lion Brand. It is called Heartland. I can't read. Heartland by Lion Brand. And it is a worsted weight number 4. So that one is calling for a J hook. And I'm using this J hook by Lion Brand. So it's a J10 or a 6mm. So, and again, you can go up or down a size depending on what you have available. And let's look at it. So this one gives you a little bit of a diagram to kind of show you how things are working up. For the hat that I made, I actually chained 43 because I wanted it to be a little longer and a little more slouchy. But what I recommend you doing is go ahead and make it as instructed. Start with chain 33. And then for your second one, if you want it more slouchy and longer, then you can add additional stitches as desired for yourself. So you're going to chain 33 stitches with color A. And with color A, you're going to double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. And you're going to work all the way across. And with row 2, with color A staying with the same color, chain 3, that does not count as a stitch. Turn your work and you're going to double crochet in each stitch across, changing to color B in the last stitch. So what that's telling you is you're going to change to the next color in the last stitch as I showed you, because you want to have a nice clean color transition. If you do it wrong at this point, it's not going to be a huge deal because this part of the hat is going to be concealed in the top where it's going to be kind of gathered up in a bunch, but it's good practice to try to get it right. But if you don't quite understand that, and you're not getting it quite right, don't panic because it's not going to really show, but it is good practice. Rows 3 and 4, you're going to switch to color B. I used colors that are called Dry to Torgus, and I used Sequoia, which is a nice brown, but of course you can choose whichever colors you like. So with color B, you're going to chain 2. That does not count as a stitch. You're going to turn, half double crochet in each stitch across, and so you're going to do that in rows 3 and 4, and then you're going to change to color A in the last stitch of row 4. So you need to be careful how you're reading it. It's talking about 2 rows in this same line. So you're going to do half double crochet all the way across, all the way back, and then you're going to change back to color A in the last step of the last stitch to give a clean color transition. So rows 5 and 6, you're going to switch back to color A. Chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, turn. You're going to single crochet in each stitch across and change to B in the last stitch of row 6. Row 7 and 8 with B, you're going to repeat rows 3 and 4, and then after that you're just going to be repeating the rows that you've already done until the piece measures about 19 inches. And the average size of an adult head is between like 18.5 to 20, like 21 or 22 inches. And hats are very stretchy, so they will fit a wide variety of people. But if you're making it for a child with a very small head, you might want to only go like 18 inches or 17. Or if you have a friend that has a very large head or very thick hair, you could go to 20 inches or 22. So that's the best part. You can kind of make these things to suit whomever you're making them for. And then at the very end, you are going to fasten off your work. You're going to leave a very long tail, and you're going to use that tail for finishing. So let me quickly demonstrate how to finish it. Now I just had this hat I was wearing held together with these clips because I didn't finish it yet because I wanted to finish it with you guys. But what you end up with is just kind of a large rectangular shaped piece like that. And then here's my tail. I left two tails. This side is the side that I carried my color up along the edge. So I don't know if you can quite see that. So that's what I'm going to use as the top of my piece. And so you'll get a large-eyed blunt needle for sewing. And then you're just going to kind of gather the top. And all you do is you just kind of weave, just kind of go up and down. And you don't have to be too fussy about this. You want to kind of always keep it the same depth and try to space them out evenly. Like you wouldn't want to go down there and pick up a stitch. Just try to do it right along the very edge. Any questions about how I'm doing this? I know I'm going really fast because we're running out of time.
Would you call that like a running stitch in sewing terms?
Yeah, this is basically a running stitch. If you were doing it while it's laid out flat, it's pretty much a running or a basting stitch. And you wouldn't have to do it exactly this way, but any way that you can kind of get it, because you just want to gather it. So you can see how it pulls together and it gathers it together. And that's the easiest way I can see to do it. But if you're a seamstress and you know a better way, then by all means, you can do it a different way. And then at this point, you do want to then go back to the very beginning and pull it together because you want to pull it together tight. Now, usually I don't endorse tying knots, but at this point, I'm not going to cut my yarn, but I would recommend kind of going through it again and then bringing it through there and tying a very tight knot, just to kind of keep it secured. And then you're still going to use the same yarn to work your seam. So you do want to secure that very tight there. I'm not going to do it because I'm going to use this again for seaming the next time, but just know like right here, because what you don't want to happen is over time, the top of your hat opening up. So you just want to make sure you're pulling it very tight and then securing it so it can't open up. And now these little clips come in very handy, and you could use like the clips you close up a potato chip bag with, or maybe even paper clips. You want to clip these right along the very edge at the bottom because you want the corner to line up nice. And then so line it up again and put one right in the middle. Because the problem with fabric like this, it's stretchy and you'll be sewing along and everything will seem fine. And then when you get to the end, you'll be like, why is that side longer than this side? It wasn't like that when I started. It's just because the fabric's stretchy. So you do want to kind of keep it together. You can add a couple of extra clips really if you need to. And at this point, you can either whip stitch it. I usually like to do a running stitch. And so for the running stitch, you come through one side and then you go back through the same side coming out the opposite side. Now my needle exited my fabric on this side, so I'm going to re-enter it the same side. And now this time I'm going to enter it the opposite side, but it's the same side that my needle exited. So I'm going to go back through. And so my needle is going to exit this side. And so I'm going to re-enter it from the same side. And what you're doing is you want to make sure, so I like to hold my seam together with my thumb and my pointer finger so that I'm holding it like really tight. And then also, I'm holding it right along the edge. So as I go through, I can feel the needle brushing against my finger. So I know it's coming out just where I want it. So like you wouldn't want to hold it down here because now you don't have that finger as a guide. And you might end up coming out much lower than what you intended. But if you use your finger and your thumb as a guide, excuse me, then it can kind of help you. So you want to space these stitches out as even as possible. So you want to keep them all spaced out the same. And you want to keep them going the same depth. Like you wouldn't want to randomly, go really deep or something crazy. And that's going to give you a very nice seam. And you might want to go ahead and check your seam as you're going to make sure it looks pretty good. And if it doesn't look good, it's easy to take it out and give it another try. Now, if you want to whip stitch it, whip stitching is you always enter the fabric the same side. So I'm going to jump over my fabric. I'm going to bring this over. And so you can see that my length of yarn is always crossing over top. And it's going to show that way. And so you can pick which seam you like better. I like the running stitch better. I feel like it looks neater. Other crafters will tell you that the whip stitch is much nicer. I just recommend trying them both, and whichever one you like it's the one for you. I think they're both equally as effective, really. Any questions about the seaming or the pattern? Because I know we kind of went through that fast. Because we're 7 minutes over, but I will take some time if you have any questions.
Yes, we are a little bit over. I'm just going to remind everyone again, we did record this, so you can watch it tomorrow at michaels.com/classes or on the Michaels YouTube channel. And if you want to join us next Monday, that's January 25th for Crochet 103, where we'll be teaching how to increase or decrease, or how to add stitches or subtract stitches from your project on purpose. We'll see you then. Yes. Oh, we got one last question. How many yards do you need for this hat?
For this hat, it calls for 2 balls of yarn, and I didn't use nearly all of it. And there are 251 yards in each ball. I bet you could make this hat for like less than 200 yards total, I would guess. So yeah, but the pattern is calling for 2 balls of this yarn. There's a lot of yarn on here, so 251 yards, but you don't really need that much for the hat. I bet less than 200 yards would make the hat. So, all right. If you do have other questions, you can contact me on Instagram or on TikTok. My handle is Mr. Woolly Bear. It's MISTER, Woolly Bear. Maybe Claire can put that in the chat. So if you have questions, you can send me a direct message, and I usually try to get back to people pretty quick. If you do, I hate to leave you. I mean, we rushed through this really fast, so I hate to leave you out in the cold without any help. So yeah, just let me know if you do need any other help, and I guess we'll see you next week for Crochet 3, and we'll learn how to make a chevron neck warmer. So, all right, thanks for coming to class. Bye.